I think that you pick and choose your battles. And what I've realized is that those will shift over your life. Just because now I'm focused on work and sport doesn't mean in 10 years that those are still going to be my priorities. It could be family and work. It could be family and sport. I think just being open to that shift is really important.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Just let go. Today's guest is known as the Queen of Pain. Not only is Amelia Boone a full-time corporate attorney for one of the largest corporations in the world, but she's also a 4-time world champion and one of the most decorated obstacle racers in history. So she's doing both. For everyone who has said to you, you can't have it all, this is your episode. Amelia Boone is doing it all, exactly what she wants to do. We talk through her decision to continue with practicing law while she continues to be a world champion with her obstacle races. She didn't want to choose one or the other. They both fuel her in different ways, so she didn't. And we talk through how she navigated those conversations, for example, with her employer, what that sounded like. And what I really enjoyed about this conversation with Amelia is she keeps it real. She talks about how she's been dubbed the Queen of Pain and what that's meant to her or hasn't meant to her along the way with her own identity. We talk through social media and how sometimes we're expected to be a certain thing because either the world or ourselves, we've built a little box around who we should be. And sometimes we outgrow that box or we realize we don't even belong in any box. So Amelia is down to earth. She's clearly very driven. She knows what she wants. And she's also extremely humble. She talks through the ups and the downs. I would dub Amelia as the queen of juxtaposition. She's known for having a box of Pop-Tarts with her in most cases, but she's also named one of the 50 fittest women by Sports Illustrated. So you can't have it all if you're Amelia and you have her discipline. Just a quick public service announcement in the event that you are not yet in our private Facebook group. Just head over to Facebook and search Why Not Now private group. We'll let you into the community. Excited to have you join. I've been going live in there answering questions. We're talking through literally how to get from idea to action and specific scenarios and situations for you, our listeners. And so it's just a great place to connect with like-minded people, feel that community, and also there's lots of different exclusive things that are happening in there that you'll want to check out. If you're like me, you spend a little time on Instagram, wink, maybe a little bit more than a little. We have recently launched a Why Not Now Instagram account. So that is where you will make sure you hear about every episode that has been launched, previous episodes that we want to make sure we have on your radar that you may have missed, and everything in between. So make sure you're following us over there. And of course, feel free to come and chat with me and connect at Amy Jo Martin on my personal account as well. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. oftentimes you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poopery, the original before you go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poopery have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopery.com and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code Why Not Now. That's all one word. And you can hear the story about Poopery in our interview with founder Susie Batiste. That's Why Not Now episode 28. Poopery is also available at Bed Bath & Beyond. Amelia, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Good deal. Well, let's hop in. First things first. Can you tell me about a time when you had to ask yourself, why not now?
Yeah. So this is a question I think for anybody, if they know me and my story, which I don't assume anybody does. But I think that a lot of people would probably think that I would talk about the decision to start racing, to become a competitive athlete at the age of 28, 29. But as I was thinking about this and I was looking back and I go, I didn't really have like a come to Jesus moment where I dove in head first. It kind of happened. And when I look back, it was something that it was never really a conscious decision, I think, on my part. In one way, it almost took a life of its own. So sorry, this is a long-winded way of getting to my actual why not now moment, which is 5 years in racing. I kind of built up this persona of being the queen of pain, of taking on all of these crazy races, of doing these incredible feats. And I was like at the top of my sport and at the top of my game and really, really felt invincible. But this was kind of what I put out there and what people saw. And what they didn't see was actually really like kind of the internal struggle that I was going through, that I was falling out of love with the sport, that I was a miserable wreck underneath it all, that my relationships were dying. And I ended up running my way into breaking my femur and then ended up with subsequent sacral fracture as well. And at that point, I made a conscious decision to open up and to not be like I was living a lie, but to share with people, the vulnerable side of me and to really chronicle my way through injury and through just the disillusionment with everything that I had been through. And it was one of those moments where I was like, I'm completely turning on my head everything I think that people had thought about me. And that's kind of a scary place to be, to open up. I hadn't let myself be vulnerable. So to me, doing that, and it wasn't all in one gigantic revelation, but it was over a course of months. So through writings and things like that, where I came out and started talking more and more about this. And I think that it really actually just kind of altered what I thought about myself and my relationship with the sport and, with who I am.
Wow, this is so timely, and I'm so glad that you shared this and you didn't try and reverse engineer and dig up something from when you started racing, because this is just, it's interesting. It sounds like the inside didn't match the outside as much, and it's so relatable for people to, I think, have a presence that we put forward, especially with social media. And then we feel static and stuck to a certain extent because that's what people encourage, and they want to see more of that. And here you are, the queen of pain, and who even has that title? I mean, that's just incredible. But then you probably felt, well, that's me. That's what's expected, so on and so forth. But it's really refreshing to hear you say this and how you recalibrated is what I'm really curious about too, because you went through such a physically just intense experience in breaking your femur, and emotionally, I'm sure too. Can you talk through a little bit of when the realization of, oh, I'm going to actually show a little more behind the scenes and what's really going on came about?
Yeah, so I think there's this kind of stigma in athletics about injury, and especially in endurance sports, because they're all in when you go run a race that's 100 miles long, it's not going to be a catastrophic injury. For instance, they're going to be stress related injuries. They're going to be related to overtraining or things you're doing wrong. So there's a lot of shame that goes into it. And I think a lot of athletes and a lot of professional athletes, which I guess I kind of am, even though I'm also an attorney, they don't want to talk about injury because you're fearful of what people will think, and you're fearful of losing your sponsors and of it's your livelihood. So a lot of athletes, when they get injured, will shut down and not say anything, and they'll just back away and not put anything out there. And for me, I guess I was just like, why does it have to be that way? Like, why should we be afraid and ashamed of talking about this? Like, this is natural. You push your body hard and you break down. And I didn't see anything wrong with talking about it, owning up to what I had done wrong. And then in the process, kind of like just working through my innermost thoughts. I've always been a writer, like the way that I deal with emotion, the way that I deal with pain. Like, I've kept a journal every day since I was like 6 years old, which is amazing to look back on, actually.
I saw you mention that, and I want to dive into that a little deeper in a little bit, but that's awesome in itself.
And so I think for me, it was just by writing out all of these things, it was I was finally me being me. And I could give two hoots if anybody actually read it. But I think just actually like putting it out there and putting it into words, I finally felt like I was coming more into my own like authentic self.
Oh, and it's interesting. Right before we hopped on, I just have to mention this because it's so timely. I literally posted something on social media about this debacle between rebranding, reinventing, and kind of redreaming, and how as human beings, we think that 180 or a right term means a reinvention. And that's not necessarily the case, because you were really just uncovering a layer that always existed. It's not like you are changing, but to the outside world, they were seeing it for the first time. And so this new layer, intuitively, I'm guessing it's resonating with people.
Right.
And has it been, well, I even saw you post something a while ago about for a while you were feeling the need to explain your decisions. And it's not that you're a self-proclaimed people pleaser by any means, but you just found yourself needing to explain when you're racing, why you're racing, what's next. And you decided to just stop, that you didn't need to do that. And can you talk through some of these a little more tactical things that have surfaced as a result of you opening up, but also showing your true color? Like, not that you weren't showing your true colors, but just how this has literally and tangibly come through.
Yeah, I think, when I was thinking at first about when you open up about things, when you reveal a part of yourself that people don't know, when I admitted after my injury and I was coming back into racing again and starting again, and I pretty much opened up and been like, look, I almost walked away from all this because I hated it. Like, it made me miserable. And you hear a lot of athletes say that after they've retired, but no one really talks about it during the process to be like, I'm actually struggling with finding joy in this and why I'm doing this. And I think what's scary about that is once you put stuff out there, you can't really unring that bell. And so you realize, like, when you open up and you're vulnerable about things, you also are encouraging others, to comment on that and things like that. So I understand why people stay private. But what's also, when you're referencing, like, not explaining, what's also interesting is that I realized that whenever you put something out there or you explain yourself or things like that, then I'm actually just writing another story. And I'm actually just writing another. So I go from being like the queen of pain, the person that, takes on everything and, wins everything, et cetera, to being the perpetually injured girl, because that's what I was putting out there, because I had like a year of injury. It's easy to get caught in these identities that starts to take on a life of its own. And so I think I realized at some point, I was like, sometimes I can do things and not explain why I'm doing them, or like, it doesn't always have to be rational. And I don't always need to justify it. Though in a lot of my minds, like, I like being an open book. And so I'm, now I like putting things out there, and I like being able to relate to people. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I have to do it 110% of the time. It's okay. It is okay to keep things private. So it's finding that balance sometimes.
You're so right in that it's easy to stamp ourselves. It's like, okay, now you're the this, you're the that. And that's such a box, if we think about it. So let's talk briefly about pain, because you're the queen. And when you're running, like, just learning more about what you do and the fact that there will be 24 hours and you're running and 100 miles and these things that a lot of people can't even imagine. Your relationship with pain, do you feel like it's up-leveled as you've just gone on? Have you always had a high threshold? How would you describe this journey that you've had with pain?
It's kind of funny because I think actually, if you talk to my parents from when I was very little, and then you see what I do now, they would say they would never expect it in a million years, because I was a very, very fearful child. And I just didn't want to be outside of my comfort zone. I didn't want to be outside of my box. And so this kind of was for me to venture into these very long endurance races, things like being in New Jersey in December when it's 20 degrees outside and you're breaking through ice and you're swimming in water, things like that. It didn't seem to fit personality wise. And so, in part of me, I think when I started doing it, it was, I was a first year associate at a law firm, and I had done everything that you are supposed to do as a responsible adult. I had gotten the best grades in high school, so I could go to the best college. In college, I was at the top of my class, so I could get in the best law school. Law school, I was at the top of my class, so I could get in the best law firm. And then I got there, and I was like, oh, okay, great. Now what? And that's when I started sport. And that's when I started looking into these types of races and whatnot. So I don't think, I never really was the concept of embracing the physical pain and things like that wasn't something that was like, oh yeah, no, that's totally natural for Amelia. That was really my first step outside of, a comfort zone. And then I found that through being out there for that long, and through figuring out how you can will yourself mentally when physically you're just completely shut down, that taste of that, I found something in me that I was like, oh, this is what life is about. This is when I'm feeling most alive right now.
Okay, let's dissect how you can will yourself mentally when physically you're breaking down. So it sounds like you have some magic voodoo psychology that you need to share with us, and that you thrive and love this and you have a thirst for it. But honestly, so, you're in mile 96, or I don't even know if you hit walls when you run 100 miles. I've run one marathon and I know I hit a wall and I won't ever run another one. But so let's say you hit a major inflection point of pain. How did you train yourself to go into your mind? Did it just start happening?
I think that I've always kind of subscribed to you break things down into manageable chunks. Okay. And so I never thought about the entirety of a race. If you have a 24-hour race in front of you, if you're 45 minutes in and you're thinking, God, I still have over 23 hours left, you're going to quit. You're going to quit. And that's just human nature. And so for me, it's always been this game of, okay, well, let me just make it to the next obstacle, or just let me make it to the next aid station, or actually just realizing what's kind of incredible the more you do it is that you'll go through really low points. 3 hours in, you may be like, I'm done. And then 2 hours later, you are back high flying on top of the world. And so that's always been very fascinating for me to try and figure out like how that works and that mind body connection. So I've always kind of viewed it as a game, as a challenge. And I think that's really what's kept me out there during those points. And really at the same time, sometimes all you can do is like sit down and laugh about it. Because if you think about it, like I always come back to gratitude in everything that I do. And I didn't for a really long time, but now it's like, I had a really bad run the other day, for instance, and I wanted to sit down on the side of the trail and cry. And there were like flies swarming me and I had run out of water and like, it was just like the worst thing ever. And I just sat there and I wanted to cry, and instead I just laughed because I get to do this. I get to be there. Like I'm voluntarily doing this. So, I mean, all you can do is just kind of be grateful for where you are.
So one of the things that I find most fascinating about you and what you've done and accomplished and 4 world champion titles, and I mean, it's amazing. But the thing that I think is most fascinating is that you have a balance and you also have this other side of your life that's very professional, that's still, along a similar path of what you set out to do in college, and you're able to do both. And I'd love to dive into that a little bit more. And it sounds like there wasn't a big aha moment when you started racing, but there must have been kind of was there ever a question, can I do both? And how that went down? Or is that an ongoing question?
I think it's fair to say it's always an ongoing question. And, I think that the story would be perfect if I had some type of, if I was racing and then I was also an attorney and I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a go of it full time as a professional athlete and dive head into it. And the thought has crossed my mind, but instead I've always been like, no, that's not what I want. It's almost like for me, it's like I'm not going to jump consciously. Like I want to do both because they feed different portions of my soul. And I think that's so critical for me, is that racing, the moment that it would have become my full professional career, I think it would have changed the character of it. And given the fact that I was already becoming disillusioned with it and already miserable, and it wasn't even my full-time gig, I couldn't even imagine, making that leap entirely. So for me, I've made the decision that, these are the two parts of my life and they're not always a perfect fit. And, maybe my performance as an athlete suffers sometimes, maybe my performance as an attorney suffers sometimes, but I like the challenge of trying to fit in both and juggle both of those.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me. I just love that you're sharing this, and the fact that both feed different portions of your soul is such a takeaway, because I think oftentimes we feel like we have to choose. And there's this world we live in that romanticizes entrepreneurship or side hustles that then must become main gigs, and that's just not reality. You don't absolutely have to choose if they're feeding you in different ways and it's good. Then you had clearly the intuition and foresight to see that maybe this wasn't supposed to be something that you were only doing. So did there come a time where you had to just at least have a conversation about schedule and balance? And
I mean, when I came over, I was at a law firm for a very long time. They were very supportive. And, when I interviewed and decided I wanted to go in-house, at a company, I've always been very upfront with people and being like, look, like, if you Google me, it's not going to come up Amelia Boone attorney. It's going to be Amelia, like crawling through mud, like dressed in a wetsuit, And so I think that I've always been very upfront and been like, this is who I am and I have this, but I promise you, like, I will get the work done. And luckily I've had great employers who are supportive and who understand that I may be traveling to races, but I'm working on the plane. I'm working the night before the race. I'm working after the race. I work weekends when to catch up if I'm missing other things because I'm traveling. And so I think that it's building trust is really important. And I've been fortunate, and just knowing, having that responsibility that it's going to get done. It may not always get done between 9 and 5, but it's, it will get done on the weekends or super early in the mornings, like 5 a.m., which is my time. And so that's really how it's kind of balanced.
Oh, that's cool too. And just being able to carve out, you're really designing your own life day schedule, and you're still able to produce on both sides. It's pretty cool.
And I think, I think I've always thought the idea of balance is overrated in life. I don't think there is such thing as balance. I think that you can do a few things very well, and then you let other things fall by the wayside. Like I can't cook. I have a pretty messy apartment, like there are certain things that I don't spend my time on. I don't have kids to take care of, for instance. And so I think that people, you pick and choose your battles, and what I've realized is that those will shift over your life, And so just because now I'm focused on work and sport doesn't mean in 10 years that those are still going to be my priorities. It could be family and work. It could be family and sport. And so I think just being open to that shift too is really important.
I agree. The word balance oftentimes sounds kind of like fingernails on a chalkboard to me.
You can do it all. No, you can't. I'm sorry. No, you can't. No one does.
You have to define what your all is, or
exactly.
Thoreau quote of, I think, the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Okay, fair enough. That's pretty logical. So if we look at where you are now, and would you say there's a why not now that's brewing? I mean, you've had this big evolution, or do you see like an act 3, act 4, or wanting to add anything else to the mix? Are you feeling better after your injury and enjoying it more now that you've been able to share more? Or how are you doing?
So I actually think that I have a lot of why not nows that are brewing, that are just going to keep popping up, and more, because I think for a long time, I never actually even really questioned things or considered things, like taking always the straight and narrow path in life. You just one foot in front of the other. You don't think about other possible options. And so now I think in my mind, like, I'm always thinking of other possible options. And so I'm like sorting through a bunch of those right now. But yeah, I mean, I think that I've finally come into, and through that decision of opening myself up, of talking through the lows and things like that, I finally feel at peace with where I am in sport and who I am. I feel like my external self has been reconciled more with my internal self. And that to me is huge. So I hope to always kind of live that authentic self.
It's interesting. I think I heard you and our mutual friend Christian, who's also been on this show, talking about your relationship with risk, and how when you first started racing, it was kind of a way to incorporate more risk without having to feel that it was truly risky. Would you say that that's now something that's in your DNA that you apply to other aspects of life?
Yeah, I think that being able to tolerate risk physically has helped me more to tolerate it in other areas of life. And also just being able to tolerate uncertainty. I've never been one that deals well with not knowing. Like, I'm that person that wants my next 10, 15 years planned out. You know, I had that entire life plan when I was young, that, you know, by the age of 32, I was going to have 2.5 kids in the white picket fence and be a partner at a law firm. And I'm 34, and that is nowhere close to what I have, you know, except for the law part. Mm-hmm. And so I think just also kind of by being comfortable, you know, in incorporating risk through the racing, it was kind of like a little gateway drug that led me to tolerate it in other areas of my life. Definitely.
Let's talk about your journaling. So you've been journaling almost daily, it sounds like, since age 6, which is fascinating. And I can't imagine going back and reading. That's got to be fun.
I mean, the first ones were like, this boy was mean to me today at school, you know, or like, I have a crush on so-and-so. So yes, it is very fun.
That's awesome. What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were writing and you were journaling?
Yeah. So I think I went back and forth. I wanted to be at one point a marine biologist. I had adopted a whale, you know, those that you can like adopt through, like you pay $10 and they send you a picture of a stock whale and tell you that it's yours.
Tricksters.
I know, right? So I had this desire to be a marine biologist when I was little. Then at some point I was like, I wanted to be a physical therapist. And then I think by the time I hit high school, I was pretty fixated on the law.
And I totally was snooping on your social media. And you also said that you reread a recent journal entry that said what you wanted to be when you grew up was also a good person.
Yes. So this is the funny thing is that I wrote, I want to be a good person or a physical therapist.
One or the other.
which is to me the funniest thing in the entire world. But I'm just going to pretend that 9-year-old Amelia was like really, really wise beyond her years, that all she wanted to do was just be a good person.
That's awesome. It's like so cool. The psychology in that too, I'm sure someone could deep dive, but the fact that you knew it was you could actually be that when you grew up, you know, something you could choose, which it is. That's so cool. So when the term playing to win versus playing not to lose, what does that mean to you?
So here's the funny thing to me is that what I've realized older I've gotten and things like that is that you can define what winning is for you as well as you can define what losing is for you. So for me, playing not to lose is doing things out of fear. And I never want to do things out of fear or you know, just trying to save face. And so when I realized, for instance, with racing, that I was always so afraid that if I went out and I had a poor performance at a race, or if I didn't do well, if I wasn't on the podium, if I didn't win, that I had everything to lose, that people would not think that I was awesome and that my family wouldn't love me, et cetera, et cetera. And then I realized, like, that's, first of all, it's just flat out wrong, that I have everything to win through racing, regardless of what my finishing place is, or even if I don't even finish the race, you know? And so I think that's one of those things where if you have your own mind shift, if you look and say, I am only going to win from this, then that's all that really matters.
And redefining kind of what they mean. And that's really interesting.
Yeah, because I've had some epic, utter failures that I see as wins because I learned a very important lesson for myself.
Oh, totally. That will have a much longer shelf life, more than likely, right? To be able to apply. Like the ROI is a little deeper. You mentioned that the side of you that's the attorney fuels a certain thing, and you as an athlete, they feel different things. What is it that you get from your professional world as an attorney that fuels you on that side?
I love puzzles. And for me, I think being an attorney in a lot of the law is like one giant puzzle of trying to figure out the best way to advocate for your clients in a way that is within the boundaries of the law, that it's like a creativity, but then it's all very, very mental. It's all It's just something for me where like when I go out for a run in the morning, I'm solving these puzzles in my mind, and I love that. And so I think that that's really, really what feeds me there for sure.
Which is really interesting because there's some alignment and parallels, obviously, with the mental side of racing that you talked about. Did you find yourself, even when you were going through law school, breaking big, huge tasks down to like sizable chunks that you could manage, kind of like you do when you're running?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that I mean, it's funny because there's a portion of me that wants to say like, there's no similarities between racing and being a lawyer. But actually, if I look at it and a lot of things that go back and forth and the things that I love about them, aside from one being extremely physically taxing and the other one being sitting behind a desk, there is still the problem solving aspect in both of them, and the whole looking at the enormity versus looking at the smaller, discrete aspects of it.
So if we were to look kind of under the hood of your operating system and zoom in, what could you tell us, whether that's how you manage your day, operating in any respect? Like, what could we glean?
In terms of
the way you
what
operate.
kind of guides me, or
yeah, like if you had, how phones have you update your iOS on your phone or whatever. If we were to find Amelia's operating system, it's just so fascinating because clearly you're wired in a way that can allow you to do these two things that people would think that's juxtaposed, but actually they're very similar. Maybe just starting with your time management. Do you have any special rules of thumb?
For me, I think it's very important to know when you're the most productive. And I learned from a very early age that I am an extreme morning person. So I will get more things done by 9 a.m. than most people will get done by 6 p.m. So I tap into that. And I'm up at 4 a.m. and that's when I run and that's when I do my work. And people will say like, don't check your phone, don't respond to emails like first thing in the morning. But that's when I am the most zoned in and the most focused. And so I've just learned that, play to your strengths in that regard, for sure, is how I really like manage that. Whereas like if I'm forced to work late in the evenings, I might as well, just crawl up in bed and wake up in a few hours.
That's really interesting then. So for sleep with you, do you try to log a certain amount? Do you go to bed early?
Yeah, I think I go to bed before my 97-year-old grandma. So I'm generally in bed by 9 p.m. And then, I'm up at 4 a.m. So it's not as much sleep as an athlete should get. And I've kind of learned that the hard way. But it's trade-offs. But I've never been a huge sleeper. So I think that knowing that routine is really important for me.
That's very interesting. What's one lesson that you find yourself learning over and over, Amelia?
So this is one that I've been trying to get better at, and that's really that failure isn't final. And I think that especially as an athlete, you're very, very quick to judge yourself based on your last performance or the things in most recent memories. And so I need, as much as I've been trying to work on redefining what winning is, redefining what failure it is, it's something that I have to keep in the forefront of my mind every single day. I'm not my race results. I'm not my last performance, and that it always can change. It's something that I find myself coming back to over and over and over again.
Oh, that's awesome. Failure is not final. It's interesting because so much of what you do is an experiment. Like you're doing these things that are, people have never done. And when you're experimenting, you can't really fail.
Right.
But the fact that my results are, how did you say that? My results are not me.
My results are not who I am. Yeah.
Who you are.
My accomplishments are not who I am either. And that's hard because I think that if you look at somebody, like how do we define ourselves? Like I say, I'm like a 4-time world champion obstacle racer. Like I'm defining myself based on my results. And so I've been really kind of internally being like, no. Who am I actually beyond that?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just what we do and everyone does it. And so it's kind of hard to step away from that sometimes.
Made me think about your journal entry when you were 6 or 9 or whatever. It's like back to the good person. Right. Yeah, because otherwise we're boxing ourselves into the Queen of Pain or the 4-time world champion, which are really fancy, cool boxes, but you're more than that. That's awesome. So rapid fire, here we go. All-time favorite book?
All-time favorite book. Oh man, I'm going to have to say Atlas Shrugged. I read it when I was in college, and I don't think there was any book that just made me think differently like that than I'd ever, I'd never really had to think like that about a book. Infinite Jest is a close second. That one was also really made me think, but just in different ways.
I'm going to add both of those to the reading list for sure. What keeps you up at night?
Honestly, the question that I ask myself all the time, which is, what should I do with my life? Which is funny, I think, being in my mid-30s, and you think, well, you're already doing things. But there's always just this, okay, well, what am I doing, in 10, 15 years? And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's like the mind spinning and twirling. And I don't think I ever used to ask that question a lot. And I think now I ask it all the time, and I'm glad that I do, because like we've been talking about, you can reinvent yourself at any age, and you don't have to box yourself in. And so, I sit and I think about this stuff, and so not a bad thing, but it's in a good way.
No, not a bad thing at all. It's stretching. And pirates or ninjas, who's tougher and why?
I'm going to go with ninjas, because they just like are the silent but deadly, because pirates are all, like the cannons and the booms and everything like that. And so it's more like speak softly and carry a big stick. I don't know.
Yeah, like the stealth. Okay, no, that's fair. That's good. I always like the backup. And can you tell me about a time when you had an oh shit moment and how you got yourself out of it?
Oh my God. Like every single race that I've ever been.
Probably, yes.
I mean, I think that whenever I have those moments, it's very, very easy to start really just like throwing in the towel. But if you think about it, like I'm such a logical person, and I'm like, okay, Amelia, how bad is this really? And then I walk myself through the steps. Is this reversible? Like, what can I do now? And so that's just that is my internal operating system, is really just to like logic my way out of it.
Your figure it out muscle.
It's all figure it outable.
Figure it outable, exactly. It's just a puzzle. It's just another puzzle for the day.
Exactly.
And what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would tell my younger Amelia, I'd probably look at like Amelia as a teenager and be like, it's all going to be okay. You'll figure it out. You'll always land on your feet. And something that I think is not told to women enough, especially young women, is that you are enough. You as a human being, you don't have anything to prove. Just by being, like, you are complete. And I think that that's a message that we hear more and more, but that just still bears repeating all the time. And especially to the younger generation, for sure.
I agree, just 100%. And it's really wonderful to hear individuals like yourself who have all these accolades say that, because seeing is believing, it really is. And so it's knowing that even without those things and those stamps and boxes, you're enough. That's it. That's all there is to it. And where can people find you and follow along your journey?
Well, you can find me on the trails. No,
literally.
You can follow me. I'm probably most active on Instagram at ARBoone11. I'm on Twitter at Amelia Boone, and I have a website that sometimes has updates. It has all my blogs in case anybody wants to read about injury and vulnerability. And that's
the next Brene Brown.
Exactly.
But on the track.
Exactly. At AmeliaBooneRacing.com.
And I do encourage people to check out your blog because you have such a enjoyable writing voice, writing style.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I found it really yummy. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It's been really interesting and inspiring. And I love that you're doing both. You can do what you want. You're not conforming. So we will be following along.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?